With me now, London correspondent Jonathan Sacerdoti. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Nuri.
So not a welcome sight in a continent really already on edge over terror scares. What's the latest on what happened today in Manchester?
Absolutely not a welcome sight. And Greater Manchester Police described recently the device as an incredibly lifelike explosive device, but later confirmed that it wasn't viable. So that's something that's going to scare people, because so far no actual information about why there was this incredibly lifelike explosive device that wasn't in fact a viable explosive. It obviously wasn't entirely a false alarm, because if it's described in that way, it seems that it could be something that was maybe a test, maybe somebody was trying to see what kind of security arrangement there was in the grounds. It's not yet clear what the cause was, but this is something that will terrify some, as we've heard ISIS pledging to carry out these kind of attacks across Europe, and also we've seen the targeting of sports grounds before, of course.
Is there a sense that the reaction to something like this, whether a drill or not, is where it should be, as Europe tries to figure out really how to deal with security on a bigger scale?
Well, so far there's been not much else but praise for how this was handled. People were evacuated in an orderly fashion. There were already thousands of supporters in the stadium, and even some of the players were on the actual pitch warming up. So it has been said that they were evacuated in an orderly fashion. People were taken out to safety. Obviously, there wasn't an actual explosive device in the grounds, as far as we're being told at this stage. But had there been, it seems that the right reaction took place. And that maybe gives some people some confidence that people have been drilled, those who need to be, in the correct security requirements in grounds like this.
Jonathan, stay with us in just a couple minutes. Let's talk Brexit. The campaigns over a possible British exit from the EU are now in high gear, with dire warnings being traded on both sides of the argument. Voting opens in 38 days, and until then, the crises the EU is facing are in full focus.
Boris Johnson is using increasingly extreme rhetoric to convince his compatriots to vote in favor of leaving the European Union. And it seems to be paying off. According to a Comres poll published Saturday, voters are twice as likely to believe that Johnson is telling the truth about the European Union than Prime Minister David Cameron. This after an incendiary interview with The Telegraph quotes Johnson comparing the EU's aims of unifying the continent under a single authority to the aims of Hitler.
I am telling you that if we vote leave on June the 23rd and take back control of this country and our democracy and our economy, then we can prosper and thrive and flourish as never before.
Major financial and business institutions have come out strongly in favor of staying inside the European Union recently. The Bank of England said a Brexit could push the world's fifth largest economy into recession, while the International Monetary Fund said it could cause a spiral of weaker growth. And on Saturday, Cameron once again made that pitch to voters.
And I'm absolutely convinced that our economic security will be better if we stay in a reformed European Union, and it will be seriously at risk if we were to leave.
Politicians on both sides of the Brexit camp are now in full-fledged campaign mode. But with 6 weeks to go until the nationwide referendum on the issue, there is still ample time to sway voters on this historic issue that has far-reaching implications, both for the future of Britain and the European Union.
Back to Jonathan Sacerdoti in London. Jonathan, if even just Boris Johnson's comments by themselves, pretty strong testament to how passionate this debate is. And we hear arguments on both sides, and on the political, on the economic. Is there a sense of which argument is winning over the British public?
Well, things are extremely close, and if you've watched the opinion polls over quite a while, they've always stood very close to one another. But usually the Remain voters have been in the slight lead, but they're hovering both around the 50% mark. The last poll of polls, which takes an average of 6 different polling companies' take on this, actually had the two sides exactly neck and neck at 50-50, which means that there's all to play for. And that's why we're hearing, for example, the major voices on either side, both from the Conservative Party, in fact, referencing the war in Europe, and then now we hear from Mr. Johnson that Hitler and Napoleon had tried to unify Europe. It seems that Hitler hasn't been in the UK media quite so much since the Second World War as he has in the last few weeks, what with Boris Johnson's evocation now, and only a few weeks ago Ken Livingstone talking about Hitler as a supporter of Zionism. This just shows how things are hotting up and how people are going all out in order to swing the public vote their way.
Jonathan Sacerdoti in London, thanks very much for this. We'll, of course, continue to follow ahead of that vote in June. Thanks very much for this.